The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week's guest brings an extraordinary background of accomplishments to the Volpe Report. He is Bill McSwain, Republican candidate for governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As far as his educational background, he is in the rarest of air. In fact, it calls to mind that famous quip from President John F. Kennedy when he addressed Yale University's commencement class, at which President Kennedy received an honorary Yale degree. Of course, John Kennedy himself had graduated from Harvard University. President Kennedy quipped that day at Yale's commencement that he now had the best of both worlds, a Yale degree and a Harvard education. The relevance of that for today's guest is that Bill McSwain actually does have an undergraduate degree cum laude from Yale University, and then went on to get his Juris Doctorate degree in law from Harvard Law School. Bill did more than just receive his law degree from Harvard. Academically, he finished near the top of his class, which qualified him for acceptance into the Harvard Law Review, and he became an editor of that nationally renowned publication. A publication, by the way, that the United States Supreme Courts and the Supreme Courts in every jurisdiction in every state in America refer to for guidance when they're making their decisions in law. It would be easy to consider Bill McSwain an intellectual in light of his academic achievements, but that would not tell the whole story, because he was also a United States Marine Corps infantry officer and a platoon commander, and was deployed to the Persian Gulf. In addition to being in private practice at some of the most distinguished law firms in the country, as well as clerking for the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, Bill was appointed in 2017 by President Donald J. Trump as the United States Attorney for the Third Circuit, a district that has 6 million people in it, and he oversaw a staff of more than 300 individuals as well as 140 U.S. attorneys. Bill went on to secure some of the most significant convictions in this country, becoming one of America's most successful criminal prosecutors. We look forward on today's show to discussing his plans for Pennsylvania, some of his predecessors' failures, and how he'll do it differently. We look forward to today's show.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Bill, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
And as my audience knows now, you are a front-running candidate for governor of Pennsylvania in the Republican primary. Beside your successful law practice, you go on to become a United States attorney twice. First, in the early 2000s, 3 to 6, as an assistant U.S. attorney, and then President Donald Trump appointed you full U.S. attorney, chief federal prosecutor in one of the largest federal districts in the country, the Eastern District, 6 million people or so in it. So talk a little bit about that part of your background in your education and why you think that helps you become a governor or qualify for governor.
Well, I've lived a life of public service, and I love public service, and it's the main reason that I'm running for governor. And I started in public service as a Marine. I served as an infantry platoon commander, and specifically a scout sniper platoon, which is kind of a specialized platoon. Stationed in Camp Pendleton, California, and I did a Westpac deployment in the mid-90s to the Persian Gulf. And I wanted to continue my life of public service, and that's why I became a lawyer. So I went to law school, as you said. I went to Harvard Law School, and I loved law school because I was preparing, hopefully, to be a federal prosecutor, which is what I wanted to do. And so I unfortunately had the opportunity to learn how to be a trial lawyer and learn how to be a prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. As you mentioned, one of the biggest federal districts in the whole country. There's about 6 million people, about half the population of Pennsylvania is in that district. It covers Philadelphia, the suburbs of Philadelphia, goes up into the Lehigh Valley, and it goes as far west as Lancaster. So a very big district.
Huge.
So I had the opportunity to learn how to be a prosecutor, working there for several years. And my dream was to one day lead the office. And so fortunately, everything kind of lined up for me during the Trump administration. It's a presidentially appointed position.
Of course.
Donald Trump appointed me as the United States Attorney for the Eastern District during his administration. I'm very proud to have served as a part of his administration. And when you look at all the candidates for a governor on the Republican side, I'm actually the only Trump appointee. I'm the only candidate. I'm the only candidate that Donald Trump has entrusted to do anything.
Right. And
I'm very proud of that connection, and very proud of the work that we did to protect public safety when I was United States Attorney. I had to step down in January of 21 because it's a presidentially appointed position.
Of course.
So when the new president came in, he has the right to appoint his own U.S. attorneys. So I left the office in January 21, and I want to continue my life of public service as Pennsylvania governor. And Lord knows we need some new leadership in Pennsylvania.
No, my audience well knows. I've gotten right on the line. I think at one point, Bill suggested that our Pennsylvania Supreme Court violated their oaths. I said that on, of course, Fox Network television. Expected to be getting a note from the disciplinary committee. Did not, by the way. So maybe they just haven't heard about it. But yeah, on that issue, I don't know how a Supreme Court can effectively ratify the governor and Kathy Boockfars, the old Secretary of State, changing the election rules like within days of the election, with drop boxes and rules and signatures didn't have to match, and not say that's clearly, we both read the same Constitution and we know what it says, and that's the purview of the legislature. The governor and his department appointee can't change the rules. And on an emergency appeal, they said, well, yeah, there's a pandemic going on. We're gonna, there's no provision in the Constitution that says in case of a pandemic or emergency, we're going to suspend all of the Bill of Rights. Of course. By the way, back to that point, that's exactly what our governor did. He suspended the Bill of Rights and the constitutional freedoms we are supposed to enjoy as citizens of this country and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and just obliterated it.
There's been all sorts of things that I think that Governor Wolf has done wrong, certainly when it comes to election integrity. I've said, been very clear about it, is that I think the administration of the election in 2020 was a partisan disgrace.
It was.
Apart from even discussing fraud or any allegations of fraud, the actual administration, the way the rules were set up, and the changing of the rules, as you described, and the specifically Governor Wolf and Kathy Boockfar, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, I think always tried to tilt the playing field to the advantage of the Democrats. And what I've said is that when I'm governor, I'm going to appoint a Secretary of the Commonwealth that is not going to be a partisan and is going to be fair to all parties, right? Because all we want is a fair system so that the person with the most votes wins. Right. And so that's going to be a priority when I'm governor. And then there's lots of other things that Governor Wolf has done to take away our freedoms, as I'm sure we're going to get into, the lockdowns, the closures, picking winners and losers in the economy. Those are not things that a governor should be doing.
No, there's no question. I'm going to the glasses as I love Pardon the Interruption, by the way, on ESPN. Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, he always says going to the glasses. I'm going to the glasses because I want to get the name of the case right. And it is the case of Chester County, Pennsylvania versus Free Thought Society. Now, I'd like you to talk about that case, but it's an extraordinary case. And as we talked off air, as a fellow lawyer, I'm not one to cite cases in front of the audience, except this deals, again, back to the cultural wars we fight in this country. Everybody cares about it. It is, to me, something, the woke mob that has divided this country, has changed the playing field, has changed academia. So anything that touches on what I will consider cultural wars issues. Now, that case, and I'm going to let you take it over. I want you to describe the case. But that's a great victory you won. They had lost at the trial court level. You came in, entered the case, took the appeal to the Third Circuit, United States Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and won a unanimous decision. And that dealt with the Ten Commandments. That's something I think people in our audience, we're a conservative region up here in northeast and central Pennsylvania, God-fearing people. I remind people on this show, this was a Judeo-Christian country in its founding and in its morality. And so talk about that case, the Chester County case.
Sure, it was a case I had early in my career as a lawyer, and there's a historic plaque of the Ten Commandments on the facade of the historic Chester County Courthouse in my hometown of Westchester. And I remember that plaque when I was a kid, growing up, riding my skateboard on High Street in front of the courthouse and seeing that plaque. It had been there since the early 1900s. Right. Well, a woman who was going to the clerk's office in the courthouse, who was an atheist, was going to get a dog license, I believe. And she walked by the plaque and suddenly she just felt offended by it. So she recruited the ACLU to help her, and they filed a case in federal court in Philadelphia saying that this was an unconstitutional thing to have a plaque of the Ten Commandments on the facade of the courthouse that was somehow a violation of the separation of church and state.
Yeah, church and state.
So the county lost the case at the trial level, as you said.
So the plaque was going to come down. Of the
They
Ten
actually put a
Commandments.
shroud over it. And they didn't actually physically remove it from the courthouse, but they put a shroud over it, and I thought that was absurd. And I was a young lawyer, I was early in my career, but I knew the Chester County commissioners,
right,
because I'd grown up in the area. And I went to them and I sort of pitched them on the idea of appealing it. So you're not going to let this thing stand, are you? I mean, this is ridiculous. This plaque should not be removed, right, for all sorts of reasons. First of all, it's not a violation of the separation of church and state. I think that the First Amendment gives us freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, first of all.
Very true.
And then secondly, there was a historic aspect to this plaque where, are we going to just whitewash the public square and just take away all symbols or statues as we see now? Or are we just going to go ahead and remove all that stuff from the public square because somebody's offended or doesn't like that version of history? It's ridiculous. It's not what we should be doing as Americans. So I convinced the Chester County Commissioners to appeal the case. And then I argued the case. Again, I was 1 or 2 years out of law school, right, in front of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appellate court for
right,
Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And we won a unanimous decision. And that case taught me a lot as a young lawyer. And one thing that it taught me is that don't listen to people if they tell you that something's impossible. Because I had lots of people telling me, you can't win that case, Bill. What are you doing? What are you wasting your time? There's a district court opinion that's been written about it that's 60 pages that acts like it's the worst constitutional violation in the history of the country. I said, no, that's not right. I'm going to appeal it, I'm going to argue it, and I'm going to win that case. And it's exactly what we did. And I'm proud to say that right now, that plaque is on the facade of the Chester County Courthouse. And actually, when I announced my campaign on September 13th in my hometown, right there in Westchester, we chose the courthouse steps.
Wow.
As a place to
right
give
by
my
that
speech.
plaque.
And the plaque was right behind me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was some nice symbolism.
There's no question about it. And it speaks to taking on battles that are sometimes difficult. Mm-hmm. Too many of our politicians in this country, Bill, take on battles after they take a poll. They have to take a poll to find out what to believe and what to say, and it should be in your heart. And reminds me of that one quip. I used it in my campaign for governor almost 30 years ago, that old story about the French general during the French Revolution who saw a crowd of people and quipped and made the statement that he said, "There go my people. I have to see where they're going so I can lead them." Pretty much sums up politics today. The secularism in this country is disgraceful.
I know the difference between right and wrong. Okay, I have my core values, and I'll tell you that people who know me will actually sometimes describe me as very stubborn. And sometimes that's presented to me in a way like, Bill, don't be so stubborn. But I think actually stubbornness is a good thing when you're being stubborn about what's right.
Right.
Okay, you're willing to take on those battles. You're willing to take on those fights. You don't care about the criticism. You don't necessarily care about the polls. You care about what's right. And I think that's what people want out of a leader. And so that's definitely a big part of my personality. It's a part of who I am. I've been that way my entire life, and I want to be that way as governor.
Well stated. What our governor did starting almost 2 years ago, locking things down, doing it in a way that was, to me, it was criminal. And I can kind of forgive the error in judgment the mistakes. We've all made them. But what I don't forgive is insidiousness, and I don't forgive intent. I don't forgive when one HVAC gets a waiver and literally less than like a half a mile away, maybe 12 blocks, in Wilkes-Barre this actually occurred, was not given a waiver. So you know what the one that got the waiver did? Approved by the governor as necessary in a case of emergency, and the other poor guy's in bankruptcy. Those things, the unfairness of the waiver process, which has been documented not just by a United States federal judge, Stickman in the Western District, but is also his own Democratic Auditor General, scathing audit of what he did. So that's the part. There, you know, and then when finally, they never released minutes of the meetings that they had with the staff that made those decisions. If that isn't something that should be transparent from our governor, to let people know what decisions and what went into when they were deciding who lives basically and their business continues and who doesn't. So, you know, start with, and what I will say is this: I had many guests in leadership of the state, in the Senate, in the House, and they all talked about the same thing. Basically, beside all of the insidious intent of our Governor Wolf, it was the lack of collaboration. Like, the first thing to me a governor should do, call in the best medical minds from, we have some of the best hospitals in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh, UPMC, of course, and call in the best economic experts. You're an adjunct lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law. The Wharton School is still there, right? The School of Business, renowned around the country. None of those people were invited. There was no collaboration. How, in God's name, could you make life and death decisions in a lockdown, and you have a group of, with all due respect to political, you know, people that you hire, but they were all only people with ideological bents in his staff, his governor staff. Take it from there.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Judge Stickman's opinion. It was a great opinion.
Wonderful.
In the Western District of Pennsylvania, where he basically described that the way Governor Wolf came up with his pandemic approach was a few people sitting around a conference table just making stuff up, right? Literally just making stuff up. And so the bottom line is we have to move on from Governor Wolf, and we need to move on from Josh Shapiro.
Right.
Because Josh Shapiro was defending everything that Governor Wolf was doing.
Rubber stamp.
He was, his employees at the Attorney General's office were walking into court and defending the lockdowns, defending the school closures. They are hand in glove, the two of them, and we cannot afford in Pennsylvania a third term of Tom Wolf.
No doubt.
That's what Josh Shapiro would be. Pennsylvania is at a tipping point. Okay, we need to go back to our fundamental values. We need to go back to our conservative values, the things that result in economic prosperity. Okay, the things that are going to result in safe streets, the things that are going to result in educational opportunity for everybody. We need to put Tom Wolf and Josh Shapiro in our rearview mirror and move on to a better Pennsylvania.
Agreed. In that opinion, I learned something that I hadn't known before, and this is even gets to the, again, how is governor? He apparently did not attend the meetings when those decisions were being made, according to Robinson, who was his deputy chief of staff, under sworn testimony in that case. The governor didn't attend the meetings.
I think what he literally did was he used the pandemic as an excuse to hide. He literally ran home to York, went down into his basement, locked the door, and told everybody else to do the same. And to me, that was just such a shameful failure of leadership. Because in a crisis, that's when leaders are supposed to be the most visible, right? I was United States Attorney during the pandemic.
Right.
And that's when I knew, okay, now I've really got to up my game because the public is counting on me. And every day during the pandemic, I was either at work, in the office, or out in the community doing the things that I needed to do to keep the community safe. I did the opposite of what Governor Wolf did. He used it as an excuse to just go into his little hiding place, okay? And when we needed leadership at that moment, he failed us. And again, we need to leave that style of leadership behind, and we need to go on to a better style of leadership. Frankly, a Marine style of leadership. As we talked earlier, I'm a Marine. And
Platoon commander.
And Marines lead from the front. They lead by example. They always put the needs of their unit ahead of their own needs. And leaders can't be afraid. And Tom Wolf governed out of fear. and he tried to make everybody else do the same thing. And that's why we suffered so much during the pandemic.
We are facing an energy crisis now. Inflation's at 7%. People can't go to the grocery store. One, they can't find products. And if they find, they're 3 and 4 times as expensive. Gas prices are ridiculous. And so we have all this energy under our state. I had my first guest of this season was former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Good man. But at any rate, he was talking about they were building pipelines from Pennsylvania so they can get some of the Marcellus Shale that we have. And we're going to have to barter in a cap and trade system with states that have no energy, have no fossil fuel, have no natural gas. Like, it would be a catastrophe. Now, Josh Shapiro has said, amazingly, done a 180 pivot. Oh, I don't know if I'm against strategy. I'm not going to commit to that, and I have to look at that, and I'm going to consider that. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's lying. So, but talk about that.
I want to be a pro-energy governor, and that's going to be a huge boon to our state. Tom Wolf has been anti-energy, and again, Wolf and Shapiro, they're hand in glove. Okay, Josh Shapiro has been an anti-energy attorney general, and would be a disaster as governor when it comes to our energy sector. And when it comes to Reggie, I think the bottom line is the people who support Reggie, like Wolf, like Shapiro, they want to see natural gas go the way of the dinosaur. Right. Literally. Right. They don't want anything to do with it. And it's so ironic because they claim to care about the environment. They claim to care about climate change. The advances that we've made in reducing greenhouse gases over the last 2 decades are almost all because of natural gas, right, because it's a clean fuel. So if you care about the environment, you should be pro-natural gas. And there's no way that we would be a part of Reggie if I were governor. If I know the legislature is pushing back on it right now, if Wolf manages to get us unilaterally into it during his last year, when I'm elected, I will get us out of it on day one.
That's a good answer, and I think that Glenn Youngkin did. It did take long for Virginia to get out of it. I think former Governor Christie said, like, within the first few days of his administration, they had been in it. He pulled them out of it. Okay, let's turn our attention as our time ticks down, Bill. I've done shows and views on Larry Krasner, a disgrace. Right now, our General Assembly, I believe, is we're going to have a bill with articles of impeachment attached to try to impeach him. He basically said there was no crime problem in Philadelphia when I believe they had 560 murders. And he said, oh, that's just gun violence. That's a separate issue. Apparently, I didn't know there was different kind of murders if you're dead. But at any rate, a catastrophe. Michael Nutter, the 2-term mayor, called him on it. And he comes back apparently teary-eyed, basically apologized. But talk about Krasner, Philadelphia, your hometown, and what's happened there. And all of Pennsylvania, really. What's going on in this country with crime?
Well, we're in a crisis throughout the state when it comes to public safety. In order to have safe streets, we need conservative leadership. And that's what I brought to the position of U.S. Attorney, and that's what I want to bring to the governor's office. Let me talk about some of the things I did as U.S. Attorney to keep the community safe. First of all, we had terrible riots in Philadelphia 2 summers ago, as there were riots throughout the country. And there was nobody in Philadelphia who was doing anything about it. The mayor wasn't doing anything about it. The DA, Larry Krasner, as you mentioned. Josh Shapiro wasn't doing anything about it. He was invisible. And of course, Governor Wolf wasn't doing anything about it. He was actually marching with people holding up signs saying Blue Lives Matter.
Blue Lives Kill, right?
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
I stepped in, my office stepped in, and we stopped those riots in Philadelphia. We had 2 days of terrible riots, the end of May, the beginning of June, looting, violence, arson, and we stepped in, and anybody that I could identify who had torched a police car, flipped it in front of City Hall, did a little dance around it, anyone who blew up an ATM, anybody who started a fire, looting along Chestnut Street and Walnut Street, anybody we could identify, we threw the book at them. And then quickly the word got out. McSwain is serious about this. If we're going to have these little dance parties around torched police cars, we're all going to go to jail. We're going to federal prison. This is serious. And it stopped. Because I stepped in because I knew that's what the law-abiding citizens needed. Right. The city was literally about to burn to the ground, and we stopped that. I also did things like I stopped heroin injection sites from invading Pennsylvania neighborhoods.
Right.
Philadelphia wanted to have that crazy program, and then we've seen in the last couple of days, Biden wants to have free crack pipes.
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that? So I stepped in, I sued to stop heroin injection sites, actually argued the case myself, which is kind of an unusual thing for a U.S. attorney to do. But I said, you know what? This is important enough that I want the court to understand that I am fully behind this. So I personally walked into court, argued the case in the Third Circuit, and won. So heroin injection sites should not invade Pennsylvania neighborhoods. Now Biden's sort of trying to undo that, and Wolf's kind of trying to undo that, but there is an opinion in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that says these are illegal.
Right.
So it's going to be hard for them to get around that. I put violent criminals in jail, and my tenure as U.S. Attorney, a lot of it was defined by my clash with Larry Krasner, because his progressive brand of prosecution is destroying civil society. You mentioned the homicides in Philadelphia. There are 560 homicides in Philadelphia last year, an all-time record. Check this statistic out. If you look at 21 and you look at the homicides in New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts combined, those 3 states, they had less homicides in 21 combined than there were in Philadelphia.
Amazing.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Amazing.
And one city actually had more homicides than 35 other states in the country. So, but it's not just limited to Philadelphia. Homicides are up in Pittsburgh.
Way up.
They're up in lots of urban areas and even in suburban and rural areas, because you can't build a wall around the cities and say the crime is going to just be confined to the city limits. It spreads.
Comes up here.
It spreads. Riots spread. Retail theft, like you were talking about, spreads. It all spreads. This culture of lawlessness spreads. So we need a governor who's going to stop that. And I'm the only candidate who has any law enforcement experience. No other candidate running for governor has any law enforcement experience, including Josh Shapiro, because he's not a real prosecutor. He's a fake prosecutor. Yeah. But on the Republican side, nobody's even held a position in law enforcement. But to me, that is issue number one. Okay, we need to have law and order. We need to have public safety, because if we don't have that, all of our other freedoms are in jeopardy. So that's going to be one of my top priorities as governor, is to have safe neighborhoods, because everybody in Pennsylvania deserves that.
Right. That's a great answer, Bill. And I don't think there's any more important issue now. I mean, the economy, the prices, the inflation. We've talked about crime and punishment is an issue, and people are genuinely afraid now. The energy, we have the ability to make this such a cost-effective state and lower those prices, and people are paying 300% and 400% more now that they can't afford anyway. They can't afford to go to the supermarket. Mm-hmm. You will face a big task if you're successful. You are eminently qualified. Your leadership qualities are unimpeachable. So
thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
I wish you the best of luck.
My
I
pleasure.
thought I was going to say I was going to leave a minute. They told me we're out of time. And as I said, you were very eloquent in what you said right before we went to break. I think that did it anyway.
Thank you.
Again, we're here today with Republican gubernatorial candidate Bill McSwain, former United States federal prosecutor and former platoon commander as a United States Marine, and the best of both worlds, a Harvard degree as well as a Yale degree. So eminently qualified to be governor of Pennsylvania, and I'm sure you'll give due consideration to his candidacy. We'll be back next week at 10:30. Thank you.